I think maybe let's just start with a small round of introduction, like we would in a real room, so that everybody knows we all have voices and we can all speak in this room and group together. And maybe just like a quick introduction with name, pronoun, location, perhaps. And thank you all for your questionnaire answers. I would really had a lot of fun reading your texts. And maybe you can just say like one small thing. What is world building for you, just so that we see that there's a many different approaches to what this is actually. So I'm Trakal, pronouns is he, him. I'm in Berlin right now. And world building for me is very much connected to writing. Obviously, this is a writing workshop, but also to game making. And I kind of try to see the two as complementary. So writing as games and game making as a type of writing. And I'm going to post a list in the chat so that we have some type of order to this, because usually we would sit next to each other, but perhaps it's a little bit easier if we have, if we know who in what order to speak. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so maybe continue with Matthias and then just go around. Hi, Casey.
Hi, it's Matthias. So you can use whatever pronouns you'd like. And I see world building as taking tangents in the present or the past and using them as threads and have some sort of imaginary about them and hypothesis on the futures, on possible futures. And yeah, I'm really thrilled to be here, and it's nice to see you all.
Then I guess it's me. Nice to meet you all. I'm Espen. Espen Hug. I'm based in Berlin, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And world building for me is also, I guess, related to this whole shared fabulation project. But right now, specifically, I'm sitting and making like what I'm identifying as like Hieronymus Bosch-like collages. And there's also world building in that in a way, sort of building up grand surreal landscapes and what kind of worlds that they are proposing. So I'm a visual artist, and that's usually my approach.
Simona, do you want to go next?
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand it first. Okay, I'm Simona and I'm from Catania in Sicily, Italy. And for me, world building is related, first of all, to my first immersive experience in world building when I was 11 years old. I read The Lord of the Ring, and it was really a disruptive moment for me. It changed my life. I get in love with the books, but in a very peculiar way. And then in high school and then in university, I started reading a lot of dystopian novel, for example, like Fahrenheit 451 or Us by Zamyatin. And then growing up, I understood that world building can be everything. When you use language, you can also try to manipulate people. When you make some words fashionable, you can also put something in the mentality of the people. And this, I mean, human language, it's something that can build a world around you and in a you, so in the society also. So I have this maybe broader vision now, but it really started with fantasy novels. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Bea. I'm currently based in Warwickshire in the UK, but normally I live in London. My pronouns are she or they. And yeah, in terms of world building, I guess I'm like a speculative fiction writer, but, and I, you know, I kind of, there's a cosmology that I'm like trying to build in that at the moment, but like I'm like other people have already said, it's so vast. Like world building is as vast as the world itself, and like I'm starting to build up a practice where like other modalities like ritual, therapy, you know, other artistic practices, like I'm trying to like stitch together what I'm doing with those worlds so that it feeds into this unifying cosmology. And I guess the really exciting thing for me is then getting to the point where that fictional world becomes a form of social organizing, and it's like leaning into that like liminal space, which is where I feel like the magic happens. So yeah, really happy to be here with all of you.
Hey, my name is Carmen. I pronounce as she, they, and I'm currently in Berlin. I think I'm especially interested because I have like a huge interest in the cinematic, and this also kind of like made me survive a little bit like my childhood and turning the fiction of the cinematic into my reality. And something like this kind of like happens right now again, of like being in my room and trying to fictionalize my reality to make it vivid and to create memories, to override what I can't cope with otherwise. So this is very interesting to me. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Issa, part of Last Earth 1 and 2. My pronouns are she, her, they, them, doesn't matter. I am based currently in Bristol in the UK, and I find world building a sort of space for collaborative dreaming, a way of finding like socially radical and contextually sensitive solutions to real world problems. And like Elise said, it's a great space for like collapsing space and time between people.
Hello, I'm Leia, pronouns she, her. I'm in Bristol at the moment, though I'm based in Berlin. And I guess for me, world building is this very community-based exercise. It's definitely about reinventing different systems or worlds. So it has this very political aspect, but then it's heavily, I mean, and for me, linked to sci-fi and fantasy, because I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy fan. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Hi, hello everyone. This is Nikki. He, him. Currently, I'm based in Amsterdam. I also work as an artist, mostly dealing with my dreams, merging them with historical facts and myths belonging to different cultures, mostly focusing on Western esoteric tradition. And I make films and sculptures using this amalgam of material. World building for me is a sort of balancing of forces to compose a given reality, I suppose, or to transform given realities. Thank you very much. Very excited about this workshop.
Hi, my name is Nina. I use she, her pronouns, and I am living on Tongva land in California, stolen Tongva land, which I think is also a form maybe of pretty sinister world building. I guess I would second a lot of the things people already said about world building, but to like add something, I think what I get excited about world building as a space for collective play and improvisation, and I'm curious how that might function today specifically. But I also write essays mostly, so I do think of a kind of research practice as a form of world building. I write essays that are pretty nebulous, well, write and film essays that are web-like, I guess, and sprawling. And I feel like that's also a form of creating worlds.
Hi, I'm Sophie. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a visual artist based in London, and I've always been really interested in games and game worlds, and also sort of science fiction and fantasy. But I think for me, it's also because of the software that I use. You start with geographical data almost within the space, and I'm quite interested in using that axes or the digital space as sites of fiction or sites of fantasy, and the worlds that kind of can come out of that. But I think I would really like to be able to develop the thinking around the structure, because I think I mainly think about landscapes. So I think it would be great I'm really interested in thinking more about forming sort of societies or structures or ways of living that are different to our sort of existence. Yeah, I think that's it.
Hi, I'm Sophia. My pronouns are she and her. I'm originally from Ukraine, but I'm currently based in The Hague in the Netherlands. Just for administrative purposes, I'm here instead of my partner who's registered Lucas de Wolf. We exchanged workshops. He went to Ukraine and one I went here. World building for me is a lot to do with imagination and abstraction of spaces and recreating reality. I'm a visual artist and I work a lot with sensory deprivation and color and sensory deprivation. So for me, it's also an abstraction of reality and also for abstraction of narrative, creating something else for individually for everybody. So yeah, something like this. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen today. Thank you very much.
I can go. Hi, everyone. I'm Netta. I am in Philadelphia at the moment, and haven't thought this out. I'm in a bit of a rushed mindset right now, but my relationship to world building at the moment, I'm formerly identified only as an artist. Now I identify mostly as a social worker, and I'm finding my way into having both. And world building is part of my work with clients. It's part of the kinds of therapy that I'm interested in. There's narrative therapy and psychodrama and all these tools that use surplus reality in different ways. And I also find that interesting as an intersection between therapeutic work and art. How does fiction sort of open up a space of reflection that can be sort of exciting and interesting in its own right, even outside of the context of healing as an end goal?
Oops, I think I missed my turn before, but I could go now. I'm Casey. I'm an artist based in Brooklyn, New York. And when I was thinking about world building and my writing, I realized that I basically am almost only involved in nonfiction. But I think that is also a kind of world building. And it made me think about this LARP called Panopticorp, where there's just a list of buzzwords that spawn a whole fake corporate culture that spirals out of control. Yeah, my collaborator and I have always joked that we're LARPing ourselves in our own work. So that's what brings me here.
I'm not sure. I think the order kind of got mixed up, but anyways, I'm Stephanie, she, her, I would say. I'm based in Berlin. I'm a visual artist. I work with 3D animation mostly. And to me, world building is, well, actually quite literal. I think I'm building worlds, within the 3D sphere, although these worlds kind of try to mimic like the real world, I would say, but it's still world building. And I'm really curious about the workshop because I don't have like a proper like written practice, I would say, but I would very much want to incorporate it more into my work. So I'm excited about it today.
Hello, my name is Penny. She, her are my pronouns. And I think for me, world building is very much about embodied knowledge, about thinking about who has the authority to make reality, how and what should we be a trader of reality to, about using world building or world crafting to think about affirmative ethics and transgressions that are not grounded in disempowerment, and in a sense thinking about how world building can perform social evolution and contextualizing that in like a kind of coexistence, and really also about, in a sense, test bedding what we want as far as worlds are concerned. Yeah, that's it. And I also totally agree with what everybody else has said. So.
Hey, I'm Miller. I am also on stolen Tongvalan, Nina, also known as Los Angeles currently. But yeah, I'm a game developer, and I guess more recently have been developing a writing practice. I thought this would be a really interesting way to connect the two, although I'm not 100% sure what we're about to get into, which is exciting to me. But in terms of world building, I was just thinking about almost most visual artists that I end up getting really into are always very good words, and oftentimes it's a subconscious thing that it isn't always a conscious thing that we're always, when we're creating things, we're always world building in some way through our own experiences and our own perception of the world, just because world building is kind of just what you do every day in your mind to make sense of the world. But thanks, I'm very excited for this.
Hi, I'm Dipani. I'm in New Delhi. She, her are the pronouns I use. World building, according to me, is like almost any active, imaginative creation is world building. But sorry, particularly what I'm interested in right now is how we build worlds through engaging with each other in the most common ways, but also in ways that help us break the idea of the world as it is in the present. So through politics, but also through conversations, and for me particularly through research. I work as a researcher and an illustrator, a visual illustrator. And in both of these, there's a sort of, there's both an overlap and a divide between the space of the self and the space where the self and the other sometimes crash into each other. And yeah, I think, I mean, I'm interested in the ways in which those two spaces bleed into each other and the worlds that are created through that bleeding. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Yvonne. She, her pronouns. I'm based in Berlin. After being 22 years away from Germany. And I think world building is very much connected to the fact that I have experienced the world for a very long time outside the kind of place where I'm from. Which I think, because I moved a lot, had the consequence that I became I focused as an artist, I focused on the world that exists through looking inside. So it's kind of like a very bodily, like a home through the body. And from that in and out, I build the world around me. This body home had I had a major crisis about 18 months ago through the diagnosis of a deadly illness. So by this, my whole world collapsed. And now I'm rebuilding, literally rebuilding my body and my world. So for me, this experience of personal crisis, which overlapped with a global pandemic, partly, means that I'm very much now trying to make sense of a world that collapsed and needs rebuilding, personally and in a much broader context. Thank you.
I think this was the end of the list, but maybe Rokas and Lucia, could you also give a short introduction? We cannot hear you.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lucia. I am from Zagreb, Croatia, and I live here now. I'm a dramaturg and a writer. So for me, basically, world building is much about structure and actually the relations that that structure holds, I would say.
Yeah, should I take my turn now? Yeah, sorry, I kind of joined late, so I wasn't exactly sure how this works, but I guess I kind of figured it out in the process. So my name is Rokas, and I go by pronouns either they, them, or he, him, or any kind of pronouns, actually. I'm studying philosophy, but I have a huge appreciation for, well, basically any kind of fictional work or fictional just kind of activity. I'm based in Vilnius, Lithuania. And so when it comes to the definition of world building, I guess I could say for me, it's a kind of moment where I would see that my own imagination somehow gets intersected and gets involved in the collective imagination. And I guess I could personally relate to this kind of this kind of way of interaction through video games and through memes. So I don't know, like I don't have a very clear definition of like what world building means to me, because I haven't really thought of it in theoretical terms. I guess I have some kind of intuitive understanding what it means, but I guess like like what kind of effect I would have when I play video games is that, well, I mean, I've been playing for years since my childhood, and whenever I stuck to some particular game and I play it for years, then I have a very, very clear memory of the map of that video game, and somehow I then, well, as a kind of, well, maybe you could refer to some even situationists, I kind of try to apply that map to the real world, or like I try to sometimes imagine myself as if in the real world I would be part of some kind of video game, or I would look at the real world through the logic of a video game. And you could also, for memes, it's something very similar, that memes make use of these like buzzwords, and they go for the like and they form like particular subcultures, and they make use of this like irony and caricature, and they build worlds from all these like devices through like rhetoric, aesthetic, and yeah, and this all takes place in both personal and collective imaginary.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rokas. It was really exciting to hear all these different perspectives. But maybe I'm just gonna give you a little bit my perspective, just so that it makes sense what we're gonna do today. As you already know, this is a writing workshop, so we're gonna use writing sort of to approach world building, and also conversations, of course, about the things that we write and we wrote. And a lot of the world building kind of approaches that you can see within science fiction, also within game design, looks at it kind of from like a top-down planetary perspective, sort of. You look at the planet, and then you look at different scientific approaches to it, like geology of the planet, biology of it, political science, and you kind of go down, and you end up with an individual or a subject, or maybe also collective, but it's very determined sort of by these objectivist, positivist ideas about what a world is. And so my approach is a little bit inverted, perhaps, that I would like to start with subjects and how subjects relate to each other within collectives, and from that build a world by the things that are contradictions between these subjects, or within the collective. Yeah. So I'm going to share with you a tool, an online app that we're going to work with. This online app is called Miro. It's a little bit like, it works a little bit like Prezi. And I'm going to send you a link at the end of the introduction so that you can all access this pad sort of and work with it. So many of the exercises will be in this pad, and you will also be able to work with it and do something in it together. I will lead you through 3 exercises today. 2 are sort of introductory ones. One, we will build a type of timeline together, and the second exercise will be a sort of object-oriented approach to the material makeup of the world. And then we will take a break, and after the break we will come back for a longer, more like role play type exercise to world building, where we will kind of find a way to write together collectively. And in the end, we'll take some debriefing time and talk about what happened. I will lead you through each of the exercises. So I will not take part in the exercises. I will be more as a type of game master character. And sometimes you might have a little bit the feeling that you maybe don't really know where this exercise is leading or how the exercise leads to the next one. But I ask you to bear with me and trust me that it will all come together somehow in the end. We will use writing mainly to relate to each other through these exercises. We will also have time to share some of the writing that we wrote. Some of the writing will happen in this Miro board. Some of the writing will happen, can happen on a piece of paper, and then you can share it later by reading it out. We will have some time after each exercise to read what we wrote. And some writing will also happen on a collective pad on the desktop. And in the end, we'll have some type of text that we have collectively written. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm using these texts also as a documentation for these kinds of workshops. And I would just credit all of you, but if you don't want to be credited for some reason, or want to be credited with a different name, then you can just let me know. You can write me an email, and I can also send the text, of course, around. You will all have access to the text afterwards anyway. Then I would just start with the first exercise. But actually, I have a transmission request, so I'm gonna have to. We're getting a transmission from the World Factory, so let's see what they have to say about it. Hello, I'm Comrade Platonov. I'm glad you received this job offer from the future past. After the tuberculosis infection my son brought home from the Gulag, I died in 1951, 2 years before Stalin. The Cosmist Resurrectionist sect was able to deep freeze my DNA print in form of saliva and mucus samples. I will have been reborn in the near future as a CRISPR-Cas9 altered baby, which will have made me effectively immortal. I will have been able to use a time transmission technology to speak to you today from the near future past. The technology is still extremely unstable. Therefore, I apologize for my appearance. To cut to the chase. In the near future, you will face an unknown revolutionary event, short URE. Due to the restrictive policies of temporal alterations, I'm afraid I cannot tell you more about this upcoming revolutionary event. Neither who the protagonists, instigators, and counter-revolutionary forces are, nor what the outcome of this event will be. These information are strictly classified to prevent temporal alterations of my present. However, as a member of a post-revolutionary literary committee, I'm here to offer you a job at the URE World Response Unit, the World Factory. The world-building approach we use at the factory is based on my own concept of the literature factory from 1926. At the World Factory, your task will be to collectively build a scenario for a post-revolutionary world. As gifted authors and researchers, you will be responsible to salvage the idea of a new world built from your own present. I'm afraid I cannot tell you more about how your world concepts will be used, nor who will be the audience and benefactors of them. Naturally, this comes with the writer's profession. Because we at the World Factory cherish the burdensome responsibility of imagining and constructing a world for generations to come, it saddens me to tell you that the job is unpaid. We cannot offer any sort of health benefits or protection from the revolutionary violence and terror that will ensue. But we'll have made sure to have recommended you in the future past for any subsequent job offers. Anyway, I will have been looking forward to your contributions to the URE response and might have seen you in the near future past. Sincerely, Andrei Platonov, a trademark by CRISPR Corporation. So let's go back here. You can all see the Miro board. You can go into your own Miro board. We're going to start here at this first exercise. History will repeat itself. And in this first exercise, we're going to build a collective timeline together. So world building often uses some type of estrangement effects, or like, I guess, Verfremdungseffekte to build secondary worlds that are different from our primary worlds. And one of the main estrangement effects that we all know is using time. So either science fiction uses the distant future, or fantasy uses some type of fictional past, or there's also things between like steampunk. And in the first exercise, I would invite you to think of an event that happened in your own lifetime and add it somehow onto this timeline between the present and the past. So just open a box like so, and write down the date, write one short sentence, what happened in this event, and one sentence, what kind of effect it had on your life. Try to be very, very brief and order them so that we have a chronological timeline. You'll have 5 minutes, and then I'll tell you what the next step is.
Is this fictional, Trakal, or is this autobiographical?
No, this is, I guess it's autobiographical, yeah. Try to approach this from your own subjective point of view. Something that really has shaped your world. Anyway. It can be historical, but it can also be very personal, like my visa was rejected, or something that happened historically in the world that has somehow affected you. Okay. How are you guys doing? I think the 5 minutes are over. I would just move on to the next exercise, and you can continue what you did before if you're not finished yet. So I'm going to share again my screen. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extend the timeline into the future. So all the way over here, we have the future. Yeah, and the timeline now goes through the present and into the future. Wait, I'm just going to copy paste the new exercise in here. And I'm copy pasting the exercise again below the one that you just saw, so that you can read up on it. So now all of you added an event onto this timeline, and now use the time difference between the event and the present and extend that difference into the future. So for example, you posted an event in the year 2019, 2 years ago from the present. Now post a new event 2 years from the present into the future in 2023. If you posted an event in 1990, that's 31 years. So post an event in 31 years into the future. This second speculative event that you're going to post now into the future of our timeline has to be related somehow to your first event. It can be related in different ways. Maybe history repeats itself. Maybe the future event is some type of historical conclusion of the first event, but they have to be somehow connected. They have to have some type of relationship. So the exercises create a future event in the same way, give it a date, describe in one short sentence what will happen in this event, and in one short sentence how it relates to the first event in the past. I would give you again 5 minutes. Time is going now. Okay, wonderful. So we build a timeline together, and maybe let's just take another 5 minutes to look at these events that you posted both in the past and in the future. Maybe you can read what the other people posted. But what we're interested in is if we can find some type of historical tropes, maybe something that some type of developments in history, something that connects us, that we as a group find in our timeline, some type of categories perhaps in our imagination of the future. Does anybody want to share what they posted, or did you already find some type of tropes or categories within history?
One trope I'm noticing is family alienation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess political turmoil, like revolutions and upheavals and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Forgetting.
But also kind of the mundane, just the ordinary day-to-day stuff that seems at the time a bit of like out of the ordinary.
Birth of passion.
Yeah, there's not so many technological things, surprisingly. There's this one thing about the AI, but I feel like it's a very slight technological change, maybe. Yeah, I'm looking for, can we get any type of hints in which way the future has shifted or changed?
I wrote about the future that that the city of Berlin shuts the doors to the world as it builds the world's largest biodome around itself and its citizens, as a continuation of my first encounter with the Euro's world's largest biodome that opened in '98. And in it, it sort of suggests the sort of larger world that is that Central Europe has become uninhabitable weather-wise. So that's like a hint towards the sort of large geographical circumstance of the future.
So something about environmental destruction, perhaps, but also like new mega projects or something like that, the way cities are constructed as mega projects.
I made a reference to the scan technology that was used in diagnosing my cancer. And then in the future, that scanner technology is something that has changed in the way that now it is part of my body, and the scanning happens through my own eyes, and it becomes much more a kind of a technology to sense, maybe to sense something outside your body, to sense a kind of a feeling.
I think it's quite interesting how there seems to be a lot about spatial dimensions. And I wonder whether, I also noticed there was like a lack of technological input. And I wonder whether it's also very much about writing one's own memory. And then like, how does that like sit within like a spatial context? Because it seems like within the future, there's a lot about either the reinforcement of borders or the loss of sense of border. But it's like always like, it seems to be like a lot of them positioned within the relation of the self.
Yeah. Or maybe kind of the quality of what borders are has changed. I think that both is true for the biodome example and also for the cyborg sensory surveillance, that our qualities of borders really become mixed perhaps in our futurity.
You said before that there is not a lot of reference about technological changes, but in a certain sense, it seems there's a lot, only that the subject, it's not the technological changes, but its impact on us. There's a lot of about the inner dimension, but I see a lot of things seems related to technological changes, and for political and social changes you can imagine from what is the script as, yes, alienation, or for example this way to interact not interact anymore with each other, because everybody has a sort of inner dimension, is interacting with its own world and feelings and so on. Or the idea of this underground theater, which is a sort of resistance or rebellion. Of course, we understand that there has been some disruptive political changes, economical changes, and for sure technological changes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It seems a little bit dystopian of an overall vision. Yeah. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seemed to me a little bit dystopian, yes.
Carmen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I really liked the thought of Lucia and Penny, and I think I would love to like think that further of like censoring like the mundane and not having like this prototypical, like especially time-sensitive sci-fi futures we just create, which are so connected to like technological change. And rather kind of like not have this like explicit into your face change to make a future necessary, rather see how actually something like mundanity can continue as a future possibility and inscribe itself into something which is upcoming. And I think this is like very interesting for me and something I would love to explore further.
Okay, because time is running, let's stop here. I just want to do one more thing with our timeline. Let's try to locate the unknown revolutionary event on this timeline. Let's just get like 2 minutes to talk about where could the unknown revolutionary event sit, or maybe in what kind of time frame could it be? And maybe if you have an idea, just quickly say why you think that could be a hint from the things that we see in our future.
For example, when about this theater revolutionary group, okay, in 2057, it reminds me first of all of the current moment, because theater have been shut down, and it seems that it could have been, you know, something like a government using censorship, and maybe theater has become illegal because it allows us to express ourselves, and also because maybe all the theater production and heritage has been considered dangerous for the stability of society. And maybe it could have been started with a sort of pandemic, avoiding people grouping in closed space. And it could be that the only way to regrouping people and being together, it's in open space where surveillance system can control all the area, for example.
Something quite interesting happening around 2043 to 2044, which might bring about a revolutionary campaign, because there seems to be a real kind of upset of our understanding of cities and communities at large through metropolis, both through, well, you know, when Berlin made this largest biodome, for example, also the legalization and controlled use of drugs, and that also kind of sitting inside this generative virtual environment to sway political events in the internet. So I don't know what it could be, but it feels like there's some sort of like astro-political phenomena going on.
Early 40s somehow. Sometime in the early 40s.
Yeah.
It's a very potent moment in time. See it as the US have been downgraded to a commonwealth of parking garages by this time. So their monopoly on cultural production has clearly diminished quite a bit, and there's opportunities for some other thought to happen.
Okay, I think this is this was already great. I think we have a little bit of an idea what happens in our nearer future, what things could be connected to the unknown revolutionary event. This discussion will continue in the next exercises. Okay, this was the first exercise. History will repeat itself. Now we're gonna just scroll down to the next exercise on the Miro board, which is called the trace. Choose an object that sustains you in the here and now. So again, this will be an exercise about the material conditions and object-oriented questions of our world. So choose an object that sustains you in the here and now, an object that sustains your practice or your body or your emotional, psychic, or spiritual well-being, and find an image representation of this object. Can just be something that you find on Google search, something simple. Okay, I'm going to read you a little sentence here about the exercise. The trace is often not material in itself, but an imprint of something long vanished. We might find no particles, just the shadow of a thing, an effect on the field around it. The trace needs a medium that represents its imprint, yet it has no form in and of itself. The trace could be inside of you, between you and me, like this text, its technologies of print, translation, and vocalization. So when the first exercise was a way of world building through estrangement effect through time, we are going to use a different estrangement effect, the idea of reduction. And I'll take this idea a little bit from Frederick Jameson, who analyzes Ursula Le Guin's work as a type of world reduction. So rather than adding things to the world, she reduces things from the world and then sees how a world kind of emerges out of that. So the object that you just had used or chosen to sustain yourself, your material self in the here and now, they are not present anymore after the unknown revolutionary event. Perhaps the revolutionary event has deleted these objects, but perhaps also if you chose a specific object, it could also be the category of objects. Like if you, let's say, chose a laptop, it could be that computers don't exist anymore. But anyway, this kind of object that you chose, it will vanish after the unknown revolutionary event. But what remains is some type of trace. So write a short descriptive paragraph about the nature of your trace. What does this object that doesn't exist anymore leave behind? How does this trace appear in the world after the unknown revolutionary event? How can one perceive it? How does its presence affect the world? What role does it play in human interspecies relations? So let's stop here. And it would be nice to hear some of the texts if some of you want to share. Maybe if you want to share, could you just raise your hand, and then I think just a few of us will be probably able to share. And I just wanted to say that all of the traces that we're going to hear and all of the objects that you see in the exercises will all be true for our collective world. That means they're all reduced collectively, just so that, you know, this is a build-up exercise, so to speak. So is anybody willing to read their text to us?
Okay, as every time the unpredictable wind was blowing, as usual, out of the blue, then it comes with it. Smell of incense in the air around, so strong and pervasive that not our dawns, not the underground structures could avoid its penetration in our body and mind. It was a memory, of course, a memory of being sensitive and senseful humans in the past. The wind was still preserving. And then every time we, dome and underground workers, were getting mad, collapsing and then exploding through unbearable emotions and storms of doubts and feelings, pain and joy at the same time, getting us crazy and willing to run, scream, breathe, and really see us in an unknown, unpredictable inner world, connecting each other but freeing us at the same time from the ruling network of the mushroom's intelligence. and then repressions and law enforcement interventions, and our replacing with other human products. But the wind would come for the new ones too, again and again, unpredictable and inevitable.
Cool, thank you. Can you just tell us which your image was? Which of the images you posted?
Yes, sorry, it was the incense.
Okay, the incense image, cool. Thank you.
Right. Certain rogue economists had been anticipating this global shortage as the thing that would precipitate the new financial crisis ever since the aftermath of 2008. And those of us who had believed them fearfully were vindicated now, but no one felt this to be some victory of prediction. Most homes still bore the vestiges of this once ubiquitous resource, and the chrome appendages that had facilitated access to abundant reservoirs of the stuff jutted out of walls and basins like some evolutionary throwback, like appendices. Summertime was perilous now, if you were caught out with a broken personal filter system, for example.
After the URE, good and bad are not considered them demarcation points of understanding choice or strengths of a person. There is a shift towards recognizing personal choice in the part that they may have called it. In the past, they may have called it a hard fork into anarchy, but they prefer to talk about it in terms of free will and empowerment. Yet all this new freedom comes with the price of reflection. One is not told that they broke the law any longer, but instead has to articulate the reasoning behind their choices to anyone who asks. This is a lengthy process and can only be done and closed when the asker, also known as the inquiring party, feels satisfied. This has actually led to the Inquisition of deterring people from creating actions that they do not feel strongly about as unreflected actions that cannot hold up to the inquiring party, hold the highest social stigma. I hope that made sense of it.
Can you tell us again which image you had? I think it always helps to connect image and text.
So actually I did it a bit wrong, I think, because I actually wrote from the idea that all of them had gone.
Ah, cool, okay. Mm-hmm.
So I co-opted everyone. So.
Nice. More collective than the collective.
My object is the water bottles that is to the right of the prompt. The feeling of being burdened by the mediocrity of how we've been looked after, the enduring sense of the body as an intricate machine you've failed to properly inspect and lubricate. It is perceived as a slightly lightened load paired with a loss of nostalgic, bemused attachment to a disliked object. The trace of the bottle is a momentum of semi-attuned care that leaves both a desire to reciprocate and a vengeful edge to the imagined reciprocation, like getting someone one of their least favorite apples or giving them a too harsh massage. In the world, its trace heightens panic. Do we have enough? A memory now panicked of the prompt to store surplus, and a sense of history of the sturdiness of care, that there at least at one point was a vast spectrum of ways we could show concern and it be accepted, even valued for its mediocrity, a legacy of adequacy, bitterness, being compatible with love.
I think we have more time for more text. If anybody else would like to read.
I can go. I've got a short one. The image is a coral. I've been trying to sculpt in ceramic recently. The coral has vanished after the URE. Its matter has shattered and its trace is a dust layer covering the sky, filling the atmosphere. This ubiquitous dust cloud looks like an orange to magenta gradient. it seems that its inhaling by humans has ambivalent outcomes. In some cases, the dust renders impossible eye contact. In other cases, it fosters a caring sense of touch.
Last Earth, you also raised your hand, I saw. Do you want to go next?
Yes, I'll go. So I didn't really write mine properly because we did a lot of talking about our objects, but so mine will be quick. Mine was the teapot. I just like to say that I would be very sad in a world without teapots. So basically, so no more teapots. So first, loose tea goes out of fashion. Tea bag businesses boom, which means slowly tea quality drops, and little by little tea becomes something very old-fashioned, out of date. Less and less people drink it. Bubble tea starts taking over and becoming even more fashionable than it is now. So countries like India and China and all the big tea producers suffer great financial losses. And on an environmental level, all the plastic cup waste from bubble tea is obviously catastrophic for the environment.
There's a lot of connections, don't you guys think? So many things connected to water elements, perhaps also with the wind. Yeah, somehow the relationship to water has drastically changed, it seems. Does anybody have anything else to read? Maybe that's completely different than, that doesn't connect to that, or does very much connect to that? Stephanie?
Yeah, I can maybe read mine. It's quite short. I posted The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I don't know if you know it, but it's like, I posted it as a representation of reality TV. So here we go. Reality TV has disappeared, or better, it has dissolved in its viewers who became the actors themselves. The stories are being written, watched, and commented on in real time. An audio AI placed in all households is designed to react to all emotions and play an individualized soundtrack on all your smart devices to accompany every scene. Its possible moods range from happy occasions featuring upbeat tunes to dangerous intrigues and tearful moments. Interactions have become more scripted, but also more fun and easy to consume.
Yeah, if there's time.
Yep.
The object I've chosen was a pencil. In corners of houses where old objects are stashed away, and in small scrap dealer shops under heavy piles of newspaper, one often finds old notebooks, often used by those who were primary school children before the URE, in which it is possible to find not yet faded, somewhat smudged writings and drawings made in pencil. A few years ago, there was a rush, although only among a small group of people, too small for it to be called even a fad, to collect these traces. Perhaps they were hoping it would become the next big thing from the past, like sugar crystals or retractable claws. But these traces were too worn to fading or smudging. The paper on which they were made was of too cheap a quality, not thick enough to survive the post-URE humidity. And the content or the message of the trace itself lacked artistic or aesthetic value. So the would have been fad never quite became a fad. And the past collectors moved on to something else. And these traces lie fading, their paper disintegrating, in corners of homes and scrap dealers' shops. I still keep mine in my cupboard, and some stacks in brown paper envelopes on my desk. When I touch them, sometimes the trace transfers onto my finger.
If anybody has any associations or ideas, if we have learned anything new about the unknown revolutionary event through the objects it has eliminated or through the traces it has left behind. Just an open discussion, no writing exercise.
I feel like maybe there's been an impact on like the atmosphere or on the environment. So maybe things haven't been able to adapt to the conditions that are now sort of existing. So certain things have been eliminated, and there's a different type of, I guess, yeah, like temperature or atmosphere. So it's like something to do with the biology of the objects or the makeup.
It also doesn't seem necessarily good or bad. Like it's not like as much is taken away as is like added. So things have just really changed and been displaced.
But I really liked how the reality TV had been replaced by another kind of sort of like, yeah, something that sort of replaced all of the emotions that we want to retrieve from reality TV. Something that imbues drama into our own interconnectedness. And like, so in a ways, maybe that example had also the ability to sort of, yeah, optimize the emote that comes from reality TV. Like somehow it, like, yeah, there's optimization in that as well somehow.
Maybe like a very quick thought is, in some sense, like some lubricant is missing, as if like water just disappeared. And I think my question would be like, what happens now? Or what is like the lubricant which we have then, if we need one?
It seems to me that for sure an inevitable climate catastrophe has happened. And this affected totally not only the souls of the people, but also the society. Maybe a new kind of network intelligence is governing and ruling the world, but for sure a climate catastrophe changed completely the human being and their perceptions, because probably disrupted all the nature around them, or separate them from the nature. Maybe the nature is not, they cannot live anymore there, and they live in these domes, but this changed completely their being.
So we now are, we went through 2 exercises. We have built a collective timeline together. We know that there is an unknown revolutionary event in the near future that will somehow alter the world that we have imagined together and will redact some objects that materially sustain our present at the moment. We will now start our jobs at the World Factory, which means that the second or the last exercise for the day, which is the main exercise, will be a type of role-playing environment to write together within this World Factory. And at the beginning, we will all take on a specific role in this World Factory and kind of introduce us to each other. And then we'll take another short break, and then we'll have another 1.5 hours maybe to actually write together. And then in the end, we will have some time to read and talk about what we wrote. And the next thing that we're going to do is to organize us in different ideological departments. Each of them has a different ideological position on what kind of world and for what purpose a world should be formed. So each of you is now invited to choose one of these departments. We will need 5 members in each of the departments, so we'll have to figure out a way to equally organize that. If you go below, you see that there are these different fields. So there's a hope department, a necessity department, a solace department, and a 4th department that's called DIY department, meaning you as a group can come up with your own ideological position within the World Factory. So again, for example, the necessity department, it asks certain questions. What world is needed? What can we make happen? How to use our resources? So the questions to this world construction is necessity, pragmatism, what kind of future could be engineered? The solace department, for example, asks more in terms of healing, reconciliation, justice. What kind of world do we need in order to feel whole again? And so on and so on. So in the DIY department, you can come up with your own main concepts and your own questions. It seems like we have a lot of people in the DIY department.
Trakal, I can move if you let me know which one has less people.
Okay.
Join us in the hope group, Penny. We're hopeful, we're positive maybe, using a lot of utopians.
I mean, how can I refuse?
Okay, but before we go into groups, we are going to choose a role. So in each department, there are going to be 5 different roles. First, there is the critic bureau. The critic is the editor of the text. They structure the text and make decisions about the literary genre of the text. They also decide who the audience of the text is and have responsibility to fit the text into the department ideology. So there's some type of formal character that kind of helps to structure the text and edit the text. And they have also a little bit of like a leadership function within the group, within the department group, but more like a moderator perhaps. Then there's the writer. As the writer, you will be writing the text. You take cues from the other members, both in content and form, but ultimately you are the medium of the text and make decisions about its style and voice. So this is the person at the beginning who will start writing what other people are saying and finds a way to, through their own style, to express the ideas of the other members. In the end, we will all add into writing, but we start out with one writer. Then there's the magical correspondent and a material correspondent. So they're both kind of like 2 complementary forces of correspondence, a type of researchers, perhaps. The magical correspondent is a researcher of the magical background information of the world. They are concerned with cosmology, mythological and spiritual knowledge of the world. Together with the material correspondent, they develop the setting. And the material correspondent is also a researcher of the material background information of the world. They are concerned with natural laws, environmental and scientific knowledge of the world. Together with the magical correspondent, they develop the setting. And the last character is the dramatist. The dramatist provides information about characters, including narrative point of view, plot, and cultural aspects of characters or subjectivities in the world. So meaning, even if you choose as a group to decide to write like an essayistic text, something that's academic, perhaps, who knows, there's still some type of question of what's the point of view, who's writing this? Is there any type of subjectivity or cultural considerations that we have to make? So these would all be questions that you ask the dramatist. Okay, this is just a short overview. I'm going to send you into groups now, into these breakout rooms within your departments to choose who picks which role. But you don't have to do any role playing yet. You don't have to do any world building yet. It's just a formal, like, okay, this is the people we have in the room, who takes up what role. And then I'm going to lead you through exercises to really get every of these roles some time to be interviewed and to give information about the world. Okay, we're at the end of our writing part. Let's find a way to read it together. I see that there was just an idea I talked with the editors just now that, I mean, maybe the second text is like a role text. Maybe we could have different roles for them to read them. The editor suggested that maybe the dramatists could read, like, if it's narrative text parts or narrator parts. And then maybe for the other 2 groups at the end, we could find 2 voices for each of the chapters.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. So excited.
Entry 7296, month 6, 2043. After the URE, when Kren was just a baby, we were moved into the domes.
These large infrastructures are designed to contain and preserve as much moisture as possible. The domes provide us with stable living conditions because of the planetary water shortage brought about by the event. Everything has changed, including the way in which people relate to one another and human perceptions more generally. We don't know who made it into a dome, how many there are, or who authorizes this election. I want Kren and all of our children to know this one day. I didn't think I would be writing a new chapter of history, and here I am. Our world has completely changed, and for one thing, I want to remember how this happened. The world I know disappeared abruptly, and it seems we have forgotten some important things from it. More than ever, I feel it is our duty to explain who we are and at which crossroads of history have we come to, Kren. There are several domes across the city which seem to be connected by a network. Each dome is a part of a larger shared structure, and we are told each is working towards finding a solution for the crisis. Artificial intelligence controls the system, so in a way we are being controlled, but it is better described as a dependency. We are dependent on the humidity the domes provide, along with the preservation of moisture and smell. There is a heightened sense of unease and unrest amongst the communities now, with factions working to lead an organized departure. There must be others living outside of the domes, and we are growing restless, waiting to be released. We are told the domes are an important stage of reestablishing life and livable conditions after the URE, but we don't know if or when the ecosystem will be restored, or if our bodies could exist off of the drugs and healthcare. The system is upheld by the people who are fully embedded within the ideological system, dripped to us whisperings of those who volunteer in repairs. A belief in science and technology has replaced and displaced human instinct and our ability to relate. Gods and deities have been made illegal entities and are drawing a new wave of litigation. I'm growing more concerned for Kren as their condition grows more obvious the older they get. We have grown to trust in machines and science over human feelings and emotions. Is it only about basic survival? What about love?
This silent world, who has grown bored of existing in their own private reality entertainment show, they decide to communicate this problem through therapy. In accordance with the phenomenological laws of this universe, the therapy session can only be with themselves. They decide to enter the dream space to meet with their therapist, a virtual dog version of themselves. As you can see, they relate their travails to the virtual dog via scent-based communication. The interaction is purely scatological. Solipsist and therapist enter the dream space. They seem to each pick up a scent in the ether and make eye contact. Solipsist
moves towards the therapist in a friendly way, tentatively guiding their nostrils towards its butthole.
Therapist
reciprocates.
Solipsist visibly relaxes a bit. The therapist looks up at them expectantly and then very deliberately sits itself on the ground. The solipsist mirrors its movement and sits on the ground, legs crossed. Therapist
defecates on the ground between them before sitting back and making eye contact with the solipsist once more.
Solipsist seems a little shocked, readjusts themselves. Solipsist, a little self-consciously.
Defecates on the ground between them, moves closer to the turd and deeply inhales.
Therapist
moves close to the solipsist's dry turd and sniffs at it.
Solipsist
watches with an inscrutable expression.
Therapist
looks up at the solipsist with a questioning expression.
Solipsist
and flings their turd away.
The solipsist repositions themselves, face cradled in their hand in a resigned way. Traces of dry shit crumble on their face from this hand, but they don't seem to notice. Therapist.
Watches the solipsist empathetically, a lump building in its dry throat.
I know this feeling all too well.
Anti-grid protesters. Comrades, the flatness of the world has led to the disappearance of highs and lows, of what makes us human. You have become highly controllable, fed drugs that are numbing your individual agency. The cyborgs you think are your friends are controlling your thoughts. The blockchain hive mind has no space for individual thought or critical thinking. You are sleepwalking. You are forgetting what it is to be human. Our highs and lows define our sense of humanity. Without them, we might as well be emptiness and chaos. Where are our intuitions, our hospitals, places of worship, schools and clinics, our parliament? These were spaces of transparency and communal decision-making. Now these decisions are made by faceless, sleeping masses. The gridders will have you believe their despotic regime is a techno-social utopia, that true equality can be achieved by reducing you to a series of ones and zeros. We are pro-humanity, pro-individual. We believe in freedom of thought and democracy. We will not be plugged into the matrix.
Pro-flatness gridders. Have you ever been feeling like there is something missing in your life? Do you want to feel like you are a part of something bigger than yourself? Do you miss being connected? Do you want to plug into the blockchain? Join us. Join the grid. All new recruits receive a welcome pack of our best Class A drugs. Come free your mind with us. Remember the world of class divides plagued by depression, anxiety, and existentialism, by war and famine? With the grid, our minds are no longer tethered to old-fashioned ideas and limitations. There is no dryness without wetness. You are one, we are one. We welcome all, we know no borders. The anti-grid movement would have you believe that we need guidance, leaders, institutions. What have they ever done for us? We believe in an online world community where gender, biology, and coding do not matter as they no longer exist in the public domain. All of us making decisions together, cyborg, human, divine entity, are interconnected and function in symbiosis.
Hope came through fear. What you believe in imprisons you. The history of these words is short. They came from a rupture of what some may call a social evolution or a magnetic embrace into the other. The other, in this case, holds a certain ambitopian nature. When it first occurred, people were confused. They couldn't understand their own minds. They had to give up their control. Becoming fluid was not only a privilege, but also a survival mechanic. Soon, people started dying. The dark triangle personality types began to become extinct, and the radical empathy unit started to be known as fierce survivors. They created new forms of governance. I was only a baby then. It started with the language of their minds. They set out about creating decentralized telepathy, on-chain ledgers, equipping their mental threads with quadratic voting and trustless networks. The personal was always the political. In the new social units, they began to understand they held their fate and their lives. And their lives could only be hustled by themselves. This led quickly to the abolishment of outsourced political paradigms. The first human-centric break, however, came around 5 years later. Just as the second generation was speaking a universal telepathy mixed with slang, but with translocal cooperation. It was summer, the hottest yet. Achingly hot. People say the weather contributed to people tripping out, mind melting. It first happened in the center of the world. People started picking up mental links to non-sentient modules. This came through as first understanding the body in a state of boundless energy exchange and translation. After some years, it led to desire, and function became malleable and frenzied. Mergers of ancestral planes and present participation began to become unclear. The world became a mono-as multiple in only 2 decades. I will tell you one of the early exercises from the emerging culti in DB. It's how they learn to talk. I say talk, but I mean mentally and energetically exchange.
Exercise 1, taken from 03*92 access. Complete this action as soon as you wake up. Do this every morning to increase accessibility to telepathic transmissions at a rate of 76%. Note to user. Do not aim to undo oneself too fast. The removal of heritage shakes the body, not mutates the mind. Now begin. The interface between conceivable entities blurs upon zoom. Radical empathy is expressed through non-hierarchical connection to each other, blurred border. Let them form into each other and feel how the synaptic movements from one cell expressing itself bleeps across all other cells simultaneously. Through this mutual respect and understanding, in which there is no cognitive demarcation between and what is not you, you create synergy, organism, and work towards shared harmonic survival. Check out that space behind your eyelid, the mind, the body, spirit stack. Consider it for a bit and zoom into the form that it takes. Further in than where you might imagine it would hurt, to look and feel the vibrations of each amorphous blob. Consider it a receptor for everyone. Your dimension will grow each morning as the sun comes up. Your teleretina will sprawl. Note for body. Keep your hands open, palms facing up. Let your hands magnetize a ladder from the palm out and climb up. While ascending, ask the question that really concerns you. Is there direction or intention at gaze? Find a mirror. There is vibration in your own image and the blueprint of the other. Close your eyes. Reach to other entities close to you and far from you. With your internal eyes on your palm, hum, hum, hum. Until you disappear in the humming of all voices. All silences, all vibrations, all energies.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome reading. So
Dear comrades, thank you for your contribution to the URE World Response Unit. The World Factory Committee will have thoroughly considered your world proposal, and in the case of its application, will have gotten back to you shortly. In the meantime, I will have wished you the best of luck with all your future endeavors and revolution survival skills. May the ideological truth be on your side. Yours always, Comrade Platonov. Okay, this is the end of the World Factory, where it would be great, I think, to do like a really quick debrief. And then, of course, if you gotta go, just drop out. But I'm very curious to what happened for you, how you experienced it, and thoughts, and I don't know, everything that comes to mind, associations. So just if you have something to say, maybe let's start with short things, and then if people have to go, they go. Yeah.
First of all, it was really magical. I would never ever imagined we would come up with something that could make sense. At the beginning, I was very worried. I said, we will never made it. But then when Yvonne started reading the final part and finished with it, I mean, I was so surprised. It was a kind of magic. Thank you so much. Really, really. And also to Yvonne, because she read the final part in such a way, it really seemed to, how can I say, making it like we have gone through an exercise and then we have come to something, you know, making everything lighter. And really, thank you so much. Thank you, Christoph, because really, I never imagined it.
I just want to say one thing that before everybody goes, or the first people leave, I just wanted to say, you're all welcome to use the text that we wrote together. I'm going to send it around, but you know, the text is collective, so please feel free to use it for your own needs and stuff.
I just wanted to say thank you to obviously to Trakal and to Karina for organizing this and making all these people who don't know each other work together and write a text together. And yeah, it's been a really amazing experience, and it's been amazing getting to know you all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I second that.
Yeah, I would also just vote in the choir. So fun to sit and like speculate and fabulate with a group of amazing people. I'm so happy to be facilitated. Like really, really fun, and I was really excited about the story that came out. Like the full 4 chapters. Like yeah, very impressed with the imaginations. The dog, also due to the dramatic effects of the dog being on screen, really sort of cemented in my memory now.
He says you're welcome.
I feel like the story couldn't exist without some of the roles and some of the story that we were kind of inhabiting. And I found at times that the world was, it felt kind of light. Like I didn't remember what my role was, or if I was a character, or I didn't always know my place or what I was supposed to be doing or thinking. But at the same time, it seemed balanced because I think it did really, I can't imagine this story outside of that world of the factory.
I had so much fun doing this, and I feel like if I were to have attempted to create that world by myself, it probably would have taken me years. So there's something really amazing about the fact that, you know, 20 people can come together with, you know, carefully curated roles and just make that happen in you know, an afternoon. It's really amazing.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for their contributions, and also Christoph and Karina, of course. But I also want to say what I found was really super interesting, and I'm not sure if it was noticed in our group, but for the whole time beyond after we got given our roles, let's say, we didn't have any personality traits attached to those roles. And that, I think, was never really kind of observed, or at least not in our group. But then throughout the storyline, our dramatist actually told us that individuation and desire and the need for having personality was like omitted. And I wondered whether that was because we did not have any roles, so we'd already sort of like codependently evolved, like within our system at Hope, or whether if we'd like had roles beyond our kind of manufacturing capacities at the factory, whether we would have not been able to tolerate this idea of giving up desire or individuation. So I thought this was really interesting in relation to the choreography of like loss of history in a sense. Yeah, but very much enjoyed. Thank you.
I hope that we will meet again instead of in front of a screen through this telepathic new language, radical telepathy that we are setting forth. So thank you very much. Thanks, of course, Trakal, Karina, for organizing, and everyone. It was great.
I'm thinking about the course of the activities, how like we started with the timeline, and there was a lot of personal content that came up, and then some like in terms of like the size of the group that seemed to be referenced in the different moments on the timeline. There was some like very large group things, which I feel like lend themselves less easily to emotional content. There was a lot of small like individual scale things. I think the balance was tipped more into the individual in that timeline. And then in the second part, where we talked about objects that sustained us, that were then redacted, it felt very individual, personal, like emotionally loaded in an area of maybe like nostalgia, or like sadness, longing, from my perspective. And then I think that from that point forward, the experience for me sort of blasted out into this like very sophisticated, complex system of like writing and organizing this kind of reality. And I think I just find it very interesting that we started the way we started and where we got to, and there was so much that we were trying to like pack in and remember, and like our roles and all that we had done to set us up. And it was very challenging, I found. And I think that from that third part onward, like for me, the emotional content was more on this like giant scale. And I think it's a testament to how much work went into it to like organize, you know, on so many different levels to help us remember to stay connected to so many different levels, as I think somebody else said. And yet at the same time, there's part of me that's like longing for more of that sort of like sense of intimate feeling that we had in the first half, that like somehow I lost touch with it. And I wanted to name that. And I also agree with everything that has been said so far. I was really impressed.
I think there was a lot of our personal selves that came into the later part as well, except maybe it was masked under the sort of speculative fictional worlds that we created. Speaking for myself, for certain, the ideas that came to me spontaneously in our discussions on what kind of world we're creating, I was surprised at how much those referred back to things that are very intimate to me at this moment.
I think I'll follow from this. I also want to start off thanking everyone, but yeah, in particular Trakal and Karina. I utterly enjoyed how the framework shifted tasks, and by that it actually shifted quite often gear and sensibilities, and it felt like quite a strong structure, which I actually think gave more freedom. And I really personally thought it was very good how I didn't know everything beforehand. It sort of just led me through step by step. But in that, I could find quite an openness. So yeah, thank you very much for that kind of thinking it through beforehand. I personally maybe have to say that I was quite nervous because I wanted to bring my own desperate personal experience into this. I wanted to make a piece of work out of this workshop. I will make this for an exhibition coming up, and I felt supported to share this here. And for me, the group of 5 actually became very very supportive, and you know, it was amazing actually what happened. And then from this giving safe space, I could really, you know, I could really kind of bring it back out again. And I think this is the energy that the reading came from. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I might just say for myself as well, I'm like super thankful for this happening, and especially concerning the last part that we had, it was like, I think what fascinated me so much, not just the outcome of the process, but all the methodology that was prepared for all this creative process, because like it had like all this very precise like division and specialization of like each role, like what each role should do, like what path should it take, like all these like templates. And and I think it's such a time saver, because if you would just like ask people to do it themselves, it would take so much time. And yeah, and I think it then led to move on and go on to this like very intensive and like creative, like imaginary, like group work. And I'm really also, it's so amazing to like read and listen these like just made up cosmologies and like politics that they have like all these own physical and magical laws and like boundaries. And yeah, and also what I noticed that this like, especially like the group brainstorming session that we had, like the longest one, I think it had so many, it's such a good way to connect with people as well. Like I had this moment, and I think my colleague, my group other person, Carmen, I think she mentioned this, like when we had like we had to join another group, like another breakout room with other people from the outer group, and then we had to return back. And then I think Carmen said that it felt like a family reunion or something, that that you kind of felt like returning to people you know so well, because like they said like what's in their mind, and you understand how they look at the world. And yeah, this is so interesting. Like I never experienced this before, and it's very fascinating. And yeah, it's an honor. Like it totally went beyond my expectations what this could turn out to be.
I will just quickly follow up here. I was like, thank you so much. And yeah, it's like this proximity which is created, which I just haven't thought of it's possible, especially right now with Zoom, and this like instant attachment to like my team or like my family. And then I had to leave them. And we're like crashed with these other worlds. And then it was, yeah, so nice to go back to like the DIY family. This was like really interesting how I would like defend my little world or like family. What I also like now in this like feedback kind of like or impression conversation kind of like thought about was like how important actually the last step of like curation or collective like reconsidering of the text is, because it feels like a really necessary consequence in our society of like coming up with like thoughts and like dreams and fictionalities, but then really like make something out of it and like sit down and do like the organizational steps and like I don't know, like the work you don't like to do so much sometimes, but you have to do. And I think this was like really nice to like do it collectively and in silence a little bit, but see how we all have to like do it. Yeah.
I could also add on to my DIY fam. Yeah, I really resonated with that. Just the thought that Trakal said at the very beginning, that is the necessity to start with subjects and build through contradictions with each other. And seeing how Carmen was talking about how the end of the whole exercise went silently, kind of massaging everything into one somewhat cohesive reality. There's something so allegorical about that, with just like how the truth and how narratives are built in the real world, and like how you go with your group, you have your little group that you fixate on this reality and you come up with this kind of narrative concept, and then you go out and try to make sense of it with all these other different groups in the world that have their own narrative for how reality actually is. And you're forced to somehow, mesh all the contradictions with each other and find where it all can make sense. And this can be, like, you see it in how conspiracy theories are created. It's how like the laws of a nation might be built, and it just, I don't know, seeing that unfold was mesmerizing. And I really thank you for showing us through that, especially to get to wake up at 5:30 in the morning here in Los Angeles and then suddenly be in a 5-hour trip towards some kind of high science fiction concept with a group of 20 people is amazing. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks to all of you guys for your feedback, and
yeah,
see you guys
thanks a lot
in the future.
Thank you so much.
So,